All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome. My name is Megan Beers. And first of all, just thanks for being here for Child Haven's first Mindful Monday gathering. As we at Child Haven navigate the coronavirus crisis in our community, we decided that we really wanted to create a space to talk with you each week. And that's why we're here, both to share what's on our minds and also to share some resources that we're thinking and talking about to support families and community during this really challenging time. So really grateful for you being a part of this first gathering. And we're going to be, I'll spend a little bit of time today just introducing who I am, talking a little bit about coronavirus and young kids and the impact of the stress of kind of all that's going on kids and families, and then open it up for some conversation. So without further ado, just a little bit about me. My name is Megan Beers. I am Child Haven's Director of Programs, and I'm a child psychologist by training and have spent a lot of my career really focusing on young kids and their families, and particularly young kids who've experienced quite a bit of stress and adversity. So this is Child Haven's a pretty exciting place for me to be as we sort of navigate collectively as an organization how we support our community around kids and families who are experiencing quite a bit of stress. A little bit personally, I'm also the mom of 2 young boys, and so as I think about the impact of all that's going on our world, I'm also navigating this right alongside many of you as a parent, pretty messily some days, and recognize just a lot of the balance that I imagine many of you are struggling with in terms of figuring out kind of a new normal for yourself, but also navigating with your children as well. So just going to jump right in and share a few thoughts and ideas around kind of the impact of all that's going on in the world on the littlest ones that are in all of our lives. It seems like it probably goes without saying that all of our worlds have changed really dramatically in the last couple months, in kind of more ways than I think even all of us are aware of, or probably even have the time to process or think about. And we've been hearing a lot of questions here at Child Haven about how does all this change and uncertainty and shift in the world impact the littlest ones in our lives. So as many of you know, Child Haven focuses in particular on building resilience in children under 5 and their families and helping them navigate stressors. And so I want to take a few minutes to just share a perspective on the impact of all that's going on the young kids. And I want to start with one piece that I think is really important and often overlooked, even as I look to resources around in our community that are coming out around supporting kids through this crisis. I think one thing that we underestimate is how much every single child understands what's going on right now. And I would say to start that we often make the mistake, I think collectively, that babies and toddlers pick up on less, thinking that they pick up on less than they actually do. And I think one starting point in thinking about how any of us support kids and families in this time is recognizing that even for babies, there's been a lot of change and their worlds probably feel really different. And that the first thing we can do as the important grown-ups in their lives is to really recognize that. So I think a couple things. One, we know that babies, even beginning in the first days and weeks of life, can pick up on the emotional state of their grown-ups. And I will say, speaking for myself and many of the grown-ups that I spend time around with right now, we're all pretty stressed and we all have a lot going on that we're navigating ourselves. And so the first point is just recognizing that the kids around us are picking up on that. And that's just as true of the babies as it is of the school-age kids and the teens. The other things that young kids are really good at picking up on is changes in routine. And all of our routines have kind of been tossed up in the air and we've been in the process of rebuilding them. So that's another way that we know that young kids are going to feel the impact of this stress, even if they don't understand sort of conceptually what's going on in the world. So I'm imagining that all of you in your homes are probably seeing this in lots of different ways. So the increased stress that young kids are feeling may show up in their sleep, it may show up in their eating, it may show up in their behavior. If your house is anything like mine, you may have seen a lot more tantrums and a lot more sort of irritability and fussiness on the part of your kids. And so recognizing that often when kids don't have the words to describe what's going on for them, that you're going to see it in their routines and their behavior. Another piece that I've been thinking about a lot recently is that this is going to change over time. So as kids as we all adjusted to the initial stress of the stay-at-home order and routines changing, that was kind of one response. But now we're 6, 8, 10 weeks in, and kids have been confined for a long time, and their routines have shifted for a long time. So I think there's an ongoing adjustment. And so what you saw a month ago may be really different than what you're seeing right now. So if we sort of start there, right, expect that even the littlest ones in our lives have a sense that something's different and something's amiss. The next thing I just wanted to put out there for all of us to consider is that kids need a story. Kids need a story to understand kind of what's going on and a way to help make sense of how the world is changing around them. We know from research that basically all of our brains, human brains, are wired for narrative. They're wired for creating stories, and that in the absence of a story that is told to us, we will try to make sense of it. We'll try to create a narrative to explain what's going on, because we don't like carrying around lots of little pieces that don't connect into one story. So one of the things that you can really do to help kids in this time of transition is to talk about what's going on in an age-appropriate way. There's some really interesting research that's come out around other natural disasters or times of sort of community trauma. One example of a study that came out recently was around the Boston Marathon bombing that happened a number of years ago, that showed that kids whose parents talked about what was going on and sort of gave words to the stress that families were feeling, those kids fared better in terms of their mental health, in terms of their school performance, in terms of their outcomes. I think often when big and scary things are going on in the world, we sometimes feel hesitant to talk about them. And particularly with young kids, we think, oh, maybe if we just don't say anything, that kids aren't going to realize what's going on. And the research really, really tells us the opposite of that. Kids will fill in the blanks, they'll feel the stress, and often what they'll do is take responsibility for it themselves and think that they've done something that's the reason that now I can't have play dates with my friends, or I can't go to school, et cetera, et cetera. So the more that you can kind of give words to what's going on and explain, the better off you'll be. I guess a piece of that, so a couple other, just to before we open up for questions, a couple other kind of what you can do kinds of things. First, in talking about what's going on, one thing to think about is kids are pretty good at guiding us around what they need to know. So my advice would be to answer kids' questions directly. So if kids are wondering about why, when I go outside, do I see people wearing masks, give an answer like, well, some people wear masks to keep themselves safe, or they wear a mask to keep others from getting sick. And start with that, and then sort of see what questions come next. Kids do a good job of gauging how much information they need. And one thing that we often, I think sometimes as adults do, is give too much information up front, and kids actually could have managed with something much simpler. So answering questions directly and with limited information is a really good place to start, and then just follow their lead. Another piece is kind of going back to the story piece, is to support their processing or their kind of making sense and storytelling through play. And do that even when it makes you uncomfortable. And I'll say just a minute about what I mean. So young kids in particular, they're probably not going to be able to tell us that they're feeling stressed. They're not going to be able to talk about what's going on, but it may show up in kind of the games they're playing and their pretend. It may show up in the pictures they're drawing, in the stories they're telling. And sometimes that can be a little alarming. So an example I'll give is if kids are hearing a lot about people dying from coronavirus or getting sick, they may start to, for example, in their pretend play, they might lay out a hospital, or they might be talking about grandma dying or grandpa dying, or other things like that in their lives, which can be, I think, oftentimes our natural instinct as adults is to shut that down and to reassure, no, it's going to be okay, it's going to be okay, as opposed to just kind of hanging in there with them and sitting with them and kind of describing what you're seeing and maybe naming some of the emotions. So, wow, I bet that's really scary for the little boy in the play, or whatever it is, to just describe and not try to shut down, because that's their effort at making sense of what's going on and telling a story that helps them to calm and kind of navigate their world. The last piece I will just say is we all know we thrive on routine. Kids thrive on routine, and all of our routines are kind of thrown up in the air right now, like I said. And So any effort to provide routine where you can, not holding yourself to a really complicated routine, but if there are little things, even for a minute or two, that you can make the same every day for kids, that's going to provide them a lot of comfort at a time when really everything else is quite different from what they expect. And then finally, I think, to just pause on the idea that all these kind of tips and ideas aside, what really the science tells us is that the best predictor of how kids are going to do in times of stress is you. It's all the important grown-ups in their lives. So even when kids are exposed to really, really hard things, they tend to navigate well if they have a safe, supportive caregiver by their side. That doesn't mean you have to be perfect. We're all going to get frustrated. We're all going to have days that are harder than others to kind of be patient with all that kids are presenting right now. But the more that just day in and day out, what they need is for you to demonstrate that you're there, and you're there to keep them safe and to help them understand what's going on. And you may not have all the answers, but you're going to hang in there with them and walk alongside them. We've got decades now of research that shows that kind of relationship support, that kind of relational health is what is going to make the biggest difference for kids thriving. So thank you for listening, navigating with me through my first effort at Facebook Live. I'm going to pause and look to my director friend Rafi here to see if there are any questions or discussion. Oh, yes. One other mention while we're waiting to see if there are any questions. As folks may know, this week is Give Big. So a lot of organizations in the community, including Child Haven, going out and asking you to invest in our work. So I want to put a plug. We are continuing to serve kids and families, and actually expanding the ways we're serving kids and families through this crisis, and would welcome your support. And so keep an eye on our social media channels and the website throughout the week to see all that we're doing for Give Big. Okay, so it doesn't seem like we have any questions right now, so we'll go ahead and take the opportunity to wrap up. And before we do so, just want to let you know we're going to be back next week. We're going to be coming back to you every Monday, and you'll be hearing from a variety of folks. We'll pull in a variety of Child Haven staff members, some of our early learning experts and developmental therapists and others to provide some ongoing just ideas and tips and tricks and ways to navigate during this unusual time. And certainly if you have any ideas for upcoming discussions or things you'd like to hear more about, definitely let us know that as well. So thank you very much. And one more thing, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask at any time. And even after the time expires today, just feel free to reach out and we can follow up either in the next Mindful Monday or through some other channel. Okay, one question that just came through. Any routines your family has picked up? And then where can I go to learn more? Great questions. Any new routines that my family's picked up? So I have a 9-year-old and 6-year-old boys who are obviously both out of school, like every other child right now. One of the routines, I'm trying to think, there are a couple things. One of the things that we have added to our routine is something differently we do in the morning. So our mornings, maybe more so than any other time of day in our house, feel really different. Instead of having kind of the hustle and bustle of getting ready and getting out of the house in the morning, there's a different kind of readjustment. So one of the things that we've done is gone through much of the same kind of as if we were going to school. Get up, have breakfast, get dressed, kind of get prepared for the day. And then before kind of the school part of the day starts, we sit down and the boys each show me the work that they've done the day before for school. So we just walk through it together, not really from a kind of intense learning perspective, but just as a time to sit and really have a point of connection at the beginning of the day. Like many of you, I am still kind of full steam ahead working. And so that kind of starting the day off with an intense one-on-one connection has seemed to simmer down some of the behaviors that were coming up in the morning. So that was one starting point for us. resources. So there are a lot of resources coming out. I think maybe the best thing we probably should do is we can post some to social media later today, but a couple that I'll mention offhand. 0 to 3, if you just spelled out 023.org, has a lot of wonderful resources that they've put out in the last couple weeks about supporting children around COVID in particular. That would be one starting place. Another one of the intervention programs we use here at Child Haven is child parent psychotherapy. It's really focused in particular on helping kids navigate around challenges. And they have put out, it's another one, if you just Google child parent psychotherapy or look at their Facebook or Instagram handle, they've put out some great links to videos and other resource pages. So one last question before we wrap up. So great one, thinking about relational health. The question is, how can grandparents or other relatives or caregivers support remotely during this time? So it's a good question, especially because I think it highlights another bit of loss that kids are experiencing. So one of the things that I think we recognize probably for ourselves, but even more so for kids, is that their relationship world has shrunk pretty dramatically. So all the other supportive grown-ups, teachers, grandparents, et cetera, that they would see daily, they're not seeing in the same way. So I would encourage, in the same way that you're building in routines with teachers, for example, the regular Zoom calls that I know my kids and many other kids are having, as well as other kind of routines, I would encourage you to figure out a way to build in routine with some of those other important adults. So for example, my kids have had a regular several times a week extended playtime with one of their grandparents, where they sit and read books together and play tic-tac-toe and do all these things that you never would really have imagined that you do remotely, but built in that time in a regular, predictable way, I think it sends the message that kids can continue to have access to and support from all these other grown-ups in addition to their parents. So it encourage parents to rely on your village remotely in the same way that you do in person. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap it up from here. Wish you all well, and we'll look forward to connecting next time. Thank you so much.